Enjoy a narrated virtual tour of the unmanned aircraft exhibited at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. See photos and videos that cover 21 aircraft that the Air Force used for training, reconnaissance, or offensive missions. The museum is free to visit and located on the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Southwest Ohio. In 1917, Charles F. Kettering of Dayton, Ohio, invented the unmanned Kettering aerial torpedo, nicknamed the Bug. Launched from a four-wheeled dolly that ran down a portable track, the Bug's system of internal preset pneumatic and electrical controls stabilized and guided it toward a target. After a predetermined length of time, a control closed an electrical circuit which shut off the engine. Then the wings were released, causing the Bug to plunge to Earth, where its 180 pounds of explosive detonated on impact. Museum personnel built this full-size reproduction of the Bug, and it went on display in 1964. In the mid-1930s, radio-controlled model airplanes were the basis for the U.S. Army Air Corps development of aerial targets for anti-aircraft gunnery training. The Radioplane Company provided almost 1,000 OQ-2A targets in 1943. It was launched from a catapult and an operator flew it with a radio controller. Over 10,000 Radioplane 200-mile-per-hour OQ-19D aerial targets were built for the U.S. Air Force between 1955 and 1958. At a range of 200 yards, it appeared to gunners like a single-engine fighter at 500 yards. In 1940, the U.S. Army Air Corps solicited for unmanned targets that could be controlled from the ground or a mother aircraft but would have provisions for carrying a pilot for ferry flights or check flights. The success of Culver's PQ-8 series led to the development of the larger and faster PQ-14 with retractable landing gear and wooden fuselage wings and tail components with stressed plywood skin. The PQ-14B on display is painted and marked in a typical World War II scheme, while some remained in service for several years after the war. Developed in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Teledyne Ryan's XAQM-81A Firebolt was a high-altitude, high-speed aerial target that set two world records for unmanned sustained flight, reaching a speed of Mach 4.3 and an altitude of 103,000 feet. It was powered by a highly advanced hybrid rocket motor that could vary thrust in flight to alter speed and altitude, providing a more flexible and realistic target for U.S. Air Force interceptor pilots. The Firebolt performed well during testing, but it did not enter production because less expensive alternatives were available. Ryan's BQM-34 Firebee was a high-speed target drone for both surface-to-air and air-to-air missiles. It was used primarily for the testing of newly developed missiles and for the training of fighter pilots flying missile-armed aircraft. Capable of being launched from the ground or from an airplane in flight, the Firebee is radio-controlled during its mission by a ground operator. Upon being hit by a missile or upon completing its mission undamaged, the Firebee is lowered safely to Earth by a self-contained parachute. The U.S. Air Force began receiving the Ryan BQM-34F Firebee version in the early 1970s. It was launched from the ground with a rocket booster or dropped from a modified C-130. It was normally recovered with the mid-air retrieval system, which included a specially equipped helicopter that hooked its 80-foot diameter parachute as it descended. If it landed in water, the Firebee-2 could float for several hours until it was recovered. The Teledyne Ryan AQM-34L Firebee is a low-level photo reconnaissance drone that was developed from the unmanned BQM-34A target aircraft. The displayed Firebee flew more than 30 missions over North Vietnam and was damaged by an SA-2 surface-to-air missile, landing by parachute in the South China Sea. Although recovered by a U.S. Navy ship, the additional saltwater damage made it too expensive to repair. From February 1970 to June 1973, Teledyne Ryan's AQM-34Q Combat Dawn Firebee unmanned aircraft flew 268 missions near North Korea monitoring voice communications. It was launched from a modified C-130, flying a pre-programmed course or was manually flown by a remote operator. It intercepted radio signals from as far as 300 miles away and relayed them in real time to a ground control van. The museum's AQM-34Q was nicknamed the Flying Submarine because of the many times it dropped into the ocean. Boeing's YQM-94A Compass Cope B was a high-altitude, long-range, remotely piloted aircraft tested in the 1970s. It was designed for long-endurance photographic reconnaissance and electronic surveillance missions. A television and other electronic equipment aboard Compass Cope sent in-flight data back to the ground-based pilot. It took off and landed from conventional runways. The displayed aircraft is the second prototype, and it flew for the first time in November 1974. Lockheed's D-21 was a highly advanced, remotely piloted aircraft designed to carry out high-speed, high-altitude strategic reconnaissance missions over hostile territory. It used technology from the A-12, YF-12 and SR-71 Blackbird family of high-speed manned aircraft. It was used on 4 flights over Communist China under the code name Senior Bowl, but none of these missions fully succeeded. The program was cancelled in 1971. Boeing's AGM-86B cruise missile is an air-to-ground self-guided nuclear weapon launched from B-52 or B-1 bombers. B-52s can carry up to 20, permitting a bomber force to launch a large number of missiles that will saturate defenses. The General Dynamics AGM-129A Advanced Cruise Missile is an air-to-ground cruise missile developed to provide the U.S. Air Force with a long-range highly survivable strategic standoff weapon. Up to 12 AGM-129 missiles can be carried by a B-52, allowing the bomber to attack multiple targets without penetrating enemy airspace. During the Southeast Asia War, the North Vietnamese would defeat radar-seeking missiles by turning their anti-aircraft radars off to avoid being hit, but doing this prevented them from launching their air defense missiles. Northrop's AGM-136A loitered as long as fuel remained, patrolling until the radar resumed operations and then would attack, suppressing the air defenses long enough for the main attack to proceed unthreatened. The General Dynamics McDonnell Douglas BGM-109G Griffin was a mobile ground-to-ground cruise missile developed to provide North Atlantic Treaty Organization theater commanders a low-cost, reliable, accurate tactical nuclear missile. They began deployment in 1983 and doing so helped bring about the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union, thus marking the first nuclear forces reduction in history. The displayed Griffin is one of 8 missiles retained for static display, with the others being loaned to museums in the United States and Europe. Beechcraft's MQM-107 Streaker was a remotely piloted vehicle used for testing and to train U.S. Air Force interceptor crews. The Streaker could mimic the heat and radar returns of different missiles and aircraft, and could also drop chaff and flares to deceive interceptor crews. It was ground-launched with the aid of solid fuel boosters that quickly accelerated it to approximately 250 miles per hour. Its flight route could be programmed prior to launch or changed during flight by a ground controller using a radio link. At the end of the mission, a parachute lowered it for a land or water recovery. The Beech QU-22B was to be an unmanned airborne relay for the Igloo White operation during the Southeast Asia War. Igloo White placed and monitored sensors to detect traffic along the main enemy supply line, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It carried a large generator above the engine to power its electronic equipment, and additional fuel in extended wing-tip tanks for increased range. Its remote control equipment allowed it to be flown by an onboard pilot or as an unmanned drone. Although the QU-22B performed well as a signal relay, all operational flights in Southeast Asia carried a pilot on board due to equipment reliability problems. In 1972, after the loss of several aircraft, the U.S. Air Force canceled the program. The museum's General Atomic RQ-1K Predator unmanned aerial vehicle provided military commanders with an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform capable of flying over dangerous areas for extended periods without risk to a human pilot. The equipment carried in the bottom turret can provide live video, still photographs, or radar imagery in all weather conditions, day or night. Using satellite data links, the information gathered by a Predator can be shared instantaneously with commanders around the world. Armed Predators were designated MQ-1 and could carry and fire 2 Hellfire missiles or other munitions. The Predator system consisted of 4 unmanned aerial vehicles, a ground control station, a satellite communications terminal and 55 personnel. Lockheed Martin's RQ-3 Dark Star was a highly advanced stealthy reconnaissance remotely piloted aircraft designed for use in high-threat environments. Designed to be fully autonomous, it could take off, fly to the target area, operate its sensors, transmit its sensor imagery, return to base and land without human intervention. Using satellite digital links to transmit sensor images, it could provide timely information across the globe. Though it never entered production, the Dark Star was an important milestone in the development of the even more capable remotely piloted aircraft which followed. Northrop Grumman's RQ-4 Global Hawk unmanned aerial system provides force commanders with the near real-time reconnaissance imagery they need to defeat an enemy halfway around the world. Global Hawk's powerful digital camera and infrared sensor gather imagery in any weather condition day or night. Its synthetic aperture radar moving target indicator lets ground crews track even small moving ground objects. A typical pre-programmed Global Hawk mission can include a 1,200-mile flight to an area of interest, 24 hours flying over the area and the flight back to base. In just 24 hours, it can survey an area the size of Illinois, about 40,000 square miles, while cruising above the range of enemy air defenses. This Global Hawk had anything but a normal career for a prototype. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, it flew reconnaissance missions in support of Operation Southern Watch, Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom and the Combined Task Force Horn of Africa. General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper is a long-endurance remotely piloted aircraft with the primary mission of locating and destroying time-critical and highly mobile targets. It also provides real-time intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance to military commanders. A Reaper system consists of aerial vehicles, a ground control station and communication equipment. A pilot and a sensor operator operate the aircraft from a remotely located ground control station. It can be disassembled into components, loaded into a special container and quickly airlifted to any location around the world. It can carry a mixture of Hellfire missiles, 500-pound laser-guided bombs, 500-pound Joint Direct Attack Munition precision-guided bombs, and various reconnaissance sensor packages. This aircraft was the first Reaper to fly in Afghanistan, flying 3,266 combat hours and 254 combat sorties. I hope you enjoyed this narrated virtual tour of unmanned aircraft exhibited at the Air Force Museum. If you would like to tour other aircraft in this series, convenient links are found in the description section below this video. Here are YouTube suggested links on similar topics that you may enjoy viewing.